All right, good morning, everybody. What's going on? Back again to talk about this Tyson Fury situation. Um, one thing in life that once it's lost, once it's gone, you can never ever get it back. To me, the most valuable thing in life, the most powerful thing in life, more valuable than money, more powerful than power, more powerful and stronger than love, stronger than hate. That one thing that I think is above all those things is time. Time can be a person's best friend, or time can be a person's worst enemy. You hear the saying in life that timing is everything. And you have to agree to this, or you have to at least admit that after Tyson Fury beat Deontay Wilder in that second fight, he had all the momentum. He came off the most impressive and arguably the biggest win of his career, okay? Became the WBC heavyweight champion and became arguably the most powerful man in the heavyweight division. Whether you want to say he is or Anthony Joshua is, Tyson Fury had the world at his feet after beating Deontay Wilder in that second fight. And we all assumed that the third fight was going to take place. And when the third fight fell through, we all assumed that the most logical thing to do would be to fight Anthony Joshua. So, as I said, the third fight with Wilder fell through. And now Tyson Fury comes out yesterday and says, I am no closer, or we are no closer to getting this fight with Joshua done than we were months ago. So, once again, all that momentum that Tyson Fury had gained, all that momentum that Tyson Fury had gained after that huge victory over Deontay Wilder and the way he won that fight, you have to say that he squandered that opportunity or that position. All that momentum, all the leverage that you would think he would have had, he lost it all because of this inactivity. And he went as far as to say yesterday that he regretted not fighting Deontay Wilder in that third fight because again he's been out of the ring for a full year and he doesn't even have a fight signed yet. So there's nothing on the horizon for Tyson Fury while Anthony Joshua just fought in November. Okay? So going back to the time thing, as we said, time could be a person's best friend or it could be its worst enemy. Well, when Tyson Fury has a lot of time on his hands, okay, and he doesn't have a fight schedule because of his mental health problems, because of his addiction problems, usually people with that mindset or that mind frame, when they have too much time on their hands, what do? They get depressed because they're bored. They don't have anything to look forward to. And then when they get depressed, what do they go to? Their addictions. So Tyson Fury has a history of having substance abuse problems, has a history with depression. Um, Obviously, no fighter likes to have a long layoff like this. But again, a layoff like this is even worse for Tyson Fury than it would be for a regular, the regular fighter. So Deontay Wilder's been out for a while, but again, he's coming off a big loss. coming off an injury and coming off a surgery. So even though people have been critical and myself have been critical about Deontay Wilder not having a fight signed yet and him being out for such a long time, Deontay Wilder does not and did not have that same momentum that Tyson Fury had. He didn't, Tyson Fury won the WBC heavyweight title. He won it in impressive fashion. He had tons of momentum. He should have worked off of that momentum. Strike while the iron is hot. But what did he do? He squandered that position that he had gained in the sport of boxing. Okay, he's become a big name in the U.S. Had that WWE appearance, which has helped him. So all that momentum that he had, he just lost it all, and he put himself in a situation where it's not beneficial to him. It's actually, in my opinion, detrimental to him because of his history, because of his past. And I was watching Raphael's podcast yesterday, and Lisa Bell's Bayless, I think her name is. I think it's Bayless. Give her a shout out. Give Ralph a shout out. She said that Tyson Fury, and I think Ralph had said this too. He's the type of guy that likes to walk to the beat of his own drum. So he's the type of guy that he wants to do things his way. He doesn't want to do what the sanctioning bodies require him to do. He doesn't want to do what would be beneficial always to himself. He doesn't want to do what's best for the sport of boxing. He doesn't want to do, like I said, what's best for himself. Sometimes, it seems as though he's self-sabotaging himself, right? He's self-sabotaging himself. So obviously, because of the pandemic, that third fight with Wilder would not be as lucrative as the second fight was. And I know Bob Arum was adamant about putting that in front of a live crowd. But again, you can't allow the greed of a promoter to affect your career, because you have a greedy promoter, which I think Bob Arum was being greedy. You can't allow that situation or his problem become your problem. So by being out of the ring so long and not fighting that third fight with Wilder, and then you had that issue where you wanted to fight in December, but you couldn't fight in December. I think it was against Ajit Caballal, because you were in arbitration with Deontay Wilder. So the whole thing was a mess. Sort of like after he beat Klitschko, he allowed himself to be stripped of the IBF title because the proper paperwork wasn't filled out. So once again, you have to put yourself and you have to surround yourself with the right people. And again, the whole issue with that manager that he had being tied to some type of organized crime, whatever. I haven't really done a lot of research about that, but a lot of other people have. So Tyson Fury needs to put himself and surround himself with the right people. He needs to have people that are going to help him and not hurt him. Obviously, Bob Arum is the promoter, but again, Bob Arum is out for himself. He's not concerned about Tyson Fury as a person, as a human being. Tyson Fury is a commodity to Bob Arum, and all Bob Arum cares about is putting on the biggest, best possible fights and the most lucrative fights. That's what Bob Arum's concerned about. So he doesn't care if Tyson Fury's out of the ring for a year and a half. He doesn't care if Tyson Fury goes into a depressive downward spiral. He doesn't care if Tyson Fury puts on excessive amounts of weight, which it looks like he has done in the in this long layoff that he has. Bob Arum doesn't care about all those things. Okay, so Bob Arum obviously is going to put the best interest of his promotional company over the fighter. And because he did that, I think it hurt Tyson Fury in this situation. Just like I said, when Tyson Fury beat Klitschko, what happened? It came out that he failed the PED test. The IBF stripped him. More than likely, the WBA probably would have stripped him as well. They were threatening to strip him as well because of the failed PED test. UCAD was investigating him. So again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but regardless if he had the depression or not, which I think the depression was exacerbated and amplified because of the situation that he put himself in. I mean, if it's his own fault, we have to call a spade here. It was his own fault. So because of all those things, Tyson Fury has no one to blame for this situation but himself. Just like after the first Wilder fight, where he had momentum there, what did he do? He threw us a curveball again and fought two meaningless tune-up fights, and one fight was almost a banana peel, where he fought Otto Wallen and his eye got busted up, and that would have thrown a monkey wrench into everything. So you have to question some of these moves that Tyson Fury has made. And it seems as though every time Tyson Fury does win the title, that's when the problems start. That's when he starts the questionable behavior. That's when he starts doing the crazy things. That's what happens. I think the responsibility of him being champion is too much pressure for him. Having that bullseye on your back, having the pressure of being in the big fights, being the man now. He seems better suited and more comfortable when he's the underdog, when everything is against him. That's when he seems to be in a better state of mind. But every time, like, just like when he beat Klitschko, he became the man. And once again, that pressure was too much. So you have to ask yourself: is the pressure becoming too much now that he's the WBC champion and he has that mega fight with Joshua looming? Can he deal with the responsibility and the pressure of being the heavyweight champion? Even Anthony Joshua had that pressure as well going into that first Andrew Ruiz fight, because he kept thinking about Wilder, kept thinking about everyone asking him about Wilder and why wasn't that fight with Wilder going to happen, and it kind of weighed on him. But he was able to overcome those feelings of pressure, and you saw what happened in the rematch. So we don't know what's going to happen with Fury moving forward. We don't know who he's going to fight next. He's cast a shadow of doubt that this fight with Joshua is going to happen in June. He's indicating that possibly he can have an interim fight and then he could fight Joshua in December. But it seems disheartening that you have Eddie Hearn saying that this fight is close to being done, and then you have Tyson Fury coming out and saying something that's totally contradictory to Eddie Hearn's statements. H Money, I'm going to let you jump in here and give your side of it. I'd be interesting to hear what you have to say on this. I know you're a big Anthony Joshua fan, but what do you think of this whole Fury situation?
How you doing, Beeb? Thanks for having me. Um, I'm shocked right now. I'm pretty shocked. I thought the fight was about to happen, and now I'm hearing Tyson Fury saying that it's Anthony Joshua's fault why the fight is falling apart. So who do you think is to blame if this fight doesn't happen?
Well, I think we could be critical of Bob Arum for not forging ahead with the third fight with Wilder, because then again, it just made Tyson Fury have more inactivity, which isn't good for a fighter like him, or it's not good for any fighter, but it's even worse for a guy like him. So I have to blame I have to blame the fighter, because the fighter is the boss. Like, Tyson Fury is the man. He has all the leverage. Um, you can argue that I don't even think you can argue. I think Tyson Fury is the biggest, most lucrative fighter in Bob Arum's stable right now. So obviously Bob Arum doesn't want to screw up that relationship. So if Fury was to put pressure on Bob Arum to say, you know what, just get me this Wilder fight. I don't care if I have to fight for less money than I did in the second fight. So I blame Arum, but I blame Fury more than I blame Arum, because Fury should be in control of his career. He's the heavyweight champion of the world. He's a force in boxing right now, or should have been a force in boxing right now if he used his leverage correctly. So I have to blame Fury because Fury has a history of doing things like this. Once again, not to sound redundant, but he was coming off a huge victory over Klitschko. What did he do? He ended up having to step away for almost 3 years. Okay, then he beats Wilder. Not beats Wilder, excuse me. He had a big fight with Wilder. I thought he won. Most people thought he won the first fight, but it was a draw. So the way that fight played out, everyone was really talking about that 12th round, how dramatic it was. It was on everyone's social media. It was on every sports outlet was showing clips and highlights of that. So Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder were a hot commodity at that time because of how climatic that ending of that fight was. So they had both those guys had all the momentum in the world and had the world clamoring for a second fight. So what does Tyson Fury do after that? He has two meaningless tune-up fights, and one of them almost went south, which could have jeopardized the second fight. So, but eventually he did end up having the second fight. But again, it just made no sense to prolong it the way they did. So now that the third fight with Wilder falls through because the rematch clause obviously was expired. But again, Fury was critical of Wilder because of what Wilder said about him, and he said, he said he's so erratic with his behavior. One day he says one thing, one day he says another. So if you remember, he said, "Well, I'll never fight Wilder again because of what he said about gypsies." And then just yesterday, he was quoted as saying, "Well, I wish I did fight Wilder." So which one is it? So you have to question this guy's mental stability. You have to question where this guy's head is at. So to answer your question, I know that was kind of a long-winded response, but to get to the bottom of your question, yeah, I have to blame Fury. I have to blame Fury because he has a history of doing things like this, and to me, it just doesn't make sense.
Okay, Beeb. So, with that being said, Tyson Fury he made a post yesterday blaming Anthony Joshua for this fight. Because the fight is not going on. He said Tyson Fury said that Anthony Joshua is ducking him, and he said, "Don't duck me the way you duck Deontay Wilder." So, what's your thoughts on Tyson Fury saying that?
Well, that's all just Tyson Fury being Tyson Fury, trying to get in Anthony Joshua's head, playing the head games, trying to do this mental gymnastics that he always likes to do with his opponents. I think it's just him trying to rile up Anthony Joshua. I think it's just trash talk. I've been critical of Anthony Joshua in the past, but I have to be honest. Anthony Joshua is what a heavyweight champion is supposed to be. If you look at Anthony Joshua, he does everything he's supposed to do. He always fights his mandatories, okay? When you go back and you look, Anthony Joshua has always, tried to unify these titles, and he has the WBA and he has the IBF and he has the WBO and he also has the IBO, whatever. So he has four of the belts, okay? And so obviously his track record suggests that he's really serious and focused with unifying these titles and becoming the unified heavyweight champion. But then when you look at a guy like Tyson Fury, who allowed himself to be stripped of the IBF title, you look at a guy like Wilder, who's been champion for 5 years and not once had a unification bout. Then even if you look at Klitschko, he never tried to get that WBC title. Okay, you can go down the line of all the fighters who allowed themselves to be stripped and allowed this title to be fractured. Okay, and let's talk about lineal. Everyone talks about lineal, and the one problem I have with lineal is I don't think that it to me it doesn't mean a lot, and to most boxing fans it doesn't mean a lot because again you can't enforce a lineal mandatory title defense. There is no lineal title belt. There are no lineal rankings. So being the lineal champion doesn't mean that that's just a perception that fans will have. Because if you remember, people say that being the lineal champion is like a marketing tool. Okay, you know what else being the lineal champion is as well? It allows you to use that as an excuse to not fight the big fights. So in other words, when George Foreman beat Michael Moore, okay, and he was ordered to fight mandatories again, in the WBA. He didn't fight the WBA mandatory. So then he fights the IBF mandatory, and he has a disputed decision over Axel Schultz that most people thought he lost. So then the IBF orders a rematch. So then he decides, I'm not going to fight Schultz. So he gets stripped of the WBA and he gets stripped of the IBF titles. But then he goes around, they go around saying, well, he's the lineal champion. So now that just gives him an excuse to not fight mandatories, not fight fights that he's supposed to fight or he's ordered to fight. So then people can use that as a tool to avoid the big fights, because then they can say, well, these guys aren't the real champion. I'm the lineal champion. And they're trying to give themselves credibility that maybe they don't deserve, give themselves power that they don't deserve, give themselves privileges that they don't deserve. So Tyson Fury, I think, has done what George Foreman did. He came back and said, oh, well, I'm the lineal champion. But again, you were out of the sport for almost 3 years while Anthony Joshua was doing all the dirty work, collecting all the belts. So he thought he could just come back and just say, I'm the lineal champion. So again, this is all Tyson Fury's mind games. It's all him just trying to portray himself and put himself out there as being something that maybe he's not, giving himself accolades that maybe he doesn't deserve. Because again, you can't fail a drug test. You can't get stripped of a title. You can't get suspended. You can't be investigated. And then all of a sudden try to wipe the slate clean and come back and say, I'm lineal champion. So that's why I question the validity, okay, and the significance of being the lineal champion, because it gives these fighters an alibi. It gives these fighters a shortcut, and it gives them privileges to not really have to do with a belt title holder champion would have to do. They don't have to fight mandatories. They don't have to go out there and fight unifications. In other words, they did become the lineal champion. Gives a fighter an opportunity to just rest on his laurels. And Anthony Joshua never rested on his laurels. As I said, I can go down the list. Other than Evander Holyfield, I think Anthony Joshua has been the most diligent and been the most consistent and the most honorable fighter in regards to fighting the mandatories and making sure that the titles have not become fractured. So he's doing everything he can. All these other guys like Wilder, one face, one name, one champion. Tyson Fury, I want to beat the best so I could be called the best. Okay, those are all words. But as much as I've criticized Anthony Joshua, he's talked the talk, but he's also walked the walk. He held these titles and never allowed them to become fractured, and he fought all of his mandatories. When you can go down the list, Lennox Lewis didn't fight Johnny Ruiz. He got stripped of one of his titles. I think he got stripped of the WBA. Riddick Bowe threw the WBC belt in the trash. George Foreman got stripped of the WBA and the IBF, right? Mike Tyson was supposed to fight Lennox Lewis, got stripped of the WBC. So you can go down the line of all these fighters that basically were saying that they were bigger and better than the title, and they don't have to follow the rules and go ahead and take your belt back. While Anthony Joshua's been the only guy outside of Evander Holyfield who's honored and basically did the things he was supposed to do as required by these sanctioning bodies. And I think he's represented the heavyweight division, and he's been a good champion by example. So that's the difference, I think, between Anthony Joshua and these other guys, is Anthony Joshua has walked the walk. So I'll have to give him credit for that, even though I have been critical of him in the past.
Yes. So, B, another question is, do you compare the lineal title to the franchise destination? How Teofimo Lopez is a franchise champion and he doesn't have any mandatories, or like how Vasily Lomachenko vacated his WBC world title to avoid, I would say, a Devin Haney fight, and he didn't have to fight his mandatory. Is that a fair comparison, you would say?
I would think that's spot on, right, dead on the money. So you're basically creating a mythical title, because again, let me ask you this. So you're a champion, but you don't have to defend your title, okay? Because it's not a real title. So how do you determine who's the number one contender for your title if there's no rankings for your title? How do you determine um when and how many times you defend that title if there's no mandatories? So all that is just it's basically a privilege, and it's a loophole for fighters to not have to fight um mandatory challengers. So how could you be considered? It's not even really a title. I would look at it more as a designated honor. Okay, but the WBC gives people a belt for it. So it just makes no sense. It would be like the LA Lakers winning the title, but then even though they don't go to the finals next year, they get to continue to call themselves NBA champion. Because imagine like calling a team the NBA franchise champion, and we don't have, and no matter what our record is next year, no matter no matter how many losses that we have, I'm still going to be the franchise champion. So if the franchise championship is never on the line, it's not a title that can be defended. There's no mandatories. There's no rankings for it. So then how is Lomachenko still not the franchise champion? Now, what they did do was Lopez had a special request where he asked Mauricio Suleiman, if I do win this fight, I want to be called the franchise champion. Okay, so that was a special request. So I guess they changed the rules now. But again, the WBC continues to make these rules up as they go along. So I think that your comparison is 100% spot on. All you're doing is giving the fighter a way out to not have to defend his title, and and not have to fight mandatories, and not have to fight ranked contenders. So yeah, I think it's a special privilege. It gives a fighter an entitlement that I don't think the fighter deserves, because then you're saying that the fighter is actually bigger than the sport. You're putting him above the sport when you make moves like that.
Okay, appreciate you. So, with that being said, if you're a matchmaker on Top Rank, if you're Bob Arum, do you put Tyson Fury in the ring with Anthony Joshua after a year-long layoff? And I've been seeing recent photos of Tyson Fury. It doesn't look like he's in the best shape. So do you feel like Tyson Fury is ready to go straight to an undisputed match with Anthony Joshua, or should he take a tune-up fight in between to get him ready? Because Anthony Joshua, he has fought against Pulev. He's been staying active. So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, given Tyson Fury's recent comments, I think he himself doesn't think he's ready for Anthony Joshua right now, and he would like to have a tune-up. That's what he's suggesting right now. So if he doesn't think he's ready, then I'm not going to say he's ready. If he's questioning whether he's ready or not, then I'm going to question whether he's ready or not. If the fighter himself is openly saying these things, I'm going to take him at his word. And again, we've seen Tyson Fury balloon up in weight, but there was, right after he won the title and he was getting ready to fight Wilder a third time, you saw how he was posting those training videos up on Instagram. Even though the pandemic was going on, he was still working out. He was still keeping himself in shape, and he still looked to be in decent shape. But now, because that fight had fallen through, I think because he has nothing to prepare for, nothing to look forward to, nothing to motivate himself to train, what does he do? He reverts back to his old ways of being lazy and eating more and eating things he shouldn't be eating. And as you said, and as everyone can see, judging by what's been posted on the internet, is he looks really out of shape. He's never been a body beautiful, but he looks more out of shape than normal. He looks more out of shape, and he looks like starting to look like he looked like when he first came back. So he seems to, like, again, all that momentum has been lost. But not only the momentum's being lost, now he seems to me to be actually going backward. He seems to be taking 4 or 5 steps backward. So not only did he squander the momentum, but now he's going the other way. He's going He's going back to where he was when he first came back. And that's not a good thing. That's not a good thing.
For sure, for sure. Thanks for having me, Habib. Man, I appreciate you. Shout outs to Eric, the ringside reporter. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. And man, it was a great conversation. I'll be
All
in the
right, man.
chat, man. Thank you, my brother.
All right,
Hey,
man.
I got a channel, man. Hopefully, one of these days we can get you on a panel with me one time.
I'll definitely do that. You got it. You got it.
Thank you, my brother. Peace.
All right. Peace out, man. Have a great one. Take care, bro. Yeah. So, this isn't about choosing sides, picking favorites. This is about being objective, guys. I mean, we just have to look at the behavioral patterns of Tyson Fury. And D Style said something to me before, and he was very critical of Tyson Fury not fighting the third fight. And at the time, what I said was, okay, well, if he doesn't fight the third fight, he can just go fight Joshua for which will be a bigger fight, which will be for more money. And D Style was always critical of Tyson Fury. He wins the title and then he goes and fights tune-ups, and he never fights the big fights after he becomes the title holder. He's actually never defended the heavyweight championship. He's won it twice and has never made a defense of it. And to this day, he still has not made a defense of his heavyweight title. Okay, so D Style has correct. This is he was skeptical of Fury fighting Wilder again, but he was also skeptical of him fighting Joshua. He said, well, he'll probably just go in there like he always does and fight one or two tune-up fights that no one wants to see. And it seems that D Style, M Stacks, once again, shout out to M Stacks. We had a debate on here, and one of the points he made was I asked him, do you think that fight with Fury and Josh was going to happen in June? He said, I don't know. And I was very adamant that I believed it was. And again, I was wrong. I have no problem coming on here and saying I was wrong. I was wrong. I was overly optimistic that Fury would not revert back to his old ways. I was overly optimistic that Fury would do the right thing moving forward. I was overly optimistic that Fury would look back and say, well, I've been to this dark place before. I don't want to go back there. But I'm just really disappointed in how this whole thing has been playing out right now. And I know I criticize Wilder too, what's going on with him, but at least he's allowing his body to heal. His body was kind of broken in that fight. He had the bicep tendon injury, which he had surgery on. It makes more sense for him to come back slower. It makes more sense for him to have a tune-up. But Tyson Fury is in an entirely different situation than Deontay Wilder. Okay? So if Deontay Wilder does come back against a guy like Charles Martin or someone along the lines of him, it's more understandable, and we can excuse that more than we can excuse Tyson Fury losing all that momentum after having arguably, I think, the greatest victory of his career, coming off the biggest fight of his career, really. I mean, you could argue the Klitschko fight in terms of significance was bigger because it was for the unified title. He beat the man who was considered, the best guy in the division, whereas beating Wilder was a great win. But again, you still had Anthony Joshua out there, so you can make an argument. But the way Fury won that fight, the way he beat Wilder, okay, Fury was an underdog going into the second fight, even though most people thought he won the first fight. So the way he won that fight and him coming back after that layoff and becoming champion again, to me, I think this is the most impressive. This is the most impressive performance of his year, of his career. Excuse me, of the year. This is the most impressive performance of his career because he went out there and actually did what he said he was going to do. He said he was going to knock out Wilder, and he did knock out Wilder. Thank you so much for the super chat, Alexander Wilson. And also, thank you so much for staying on top of the news because you always bring things to my attention that I feel is very useful and things that I sometimes miss. So shout out to Alexander Wilson once again for the super chat, and he goes on to say, Hearn said yesterday during the Canelo Yildirim press conference that AJ Fury is very close, and an announcement is immediate. So who are we supposed to believe? I want to believe Hearn. I want to believe Hearn, but I can't ignore the volatility and the mindset and the behavior of Tyson Fury given his past, because he's gotten us all hyped up for fights before only to have them not happen. This isn't the first time that we've been in a situation like this with Tyson Fury. He's notorious for, AJ, if he says he's going to do something, he does it. His behavior has been different than Fury's. And if this fight with Fury doesn't happen, AJ could fight Usyk or Joe Joyce, or he could fight the winner of that fight if they end up fighting. So maybe the WBO would say Usyk can fight Joshua if the Fury fight's not happening. And that would be a big fight, I think, in Europe. I think in the UK, I think that would do great numbers. So I think Joshua could fight, or he could wait and he could fight the winner of Dillian White versus Alexander Povetkin. If Dillian White beats Alexander Povetkin, that would be a natural. That would be a great UK fight. Anthony Joshua versus Dillian White. Anthony Joshua versus Alexander Usyk. Anthony Joshua versus Joe Joyce. These would all be great UK fights. These would be all great fights that I think a lot of people would tune in on DAZN to watch. And these are all opponents that I don't think Fury would fight. I don't think Fury has no desire to fight Usyk. He has no desire to fight Dillian White. He has no desire to fight Joe Joyce. Whereas Anthony Joshua is open to fighting anybody, really. So it is what it is, guys. I mean, we can't ignore the empirical data. We can't ignore patterns of behavior. We can't just disregard and pretend that the past never happened. And we can't look at the past and look at the patterns of these guys and not formulate an opinion based off of that. It's hard to overlook the erratic behavior of Tyson Fury. It just is. It just is. So who do I believe? Right now, if you would put a gun to my head, I don't think the fight's going to happen in June. I don't. I really don't. And if I'm wrong, I'll be happy to be wrong. I'll be happy to be wrong. So to answer your question, Alexander Wilson, I tend to believe Fury more than I believe Hearn, to be perfectly honest. Now, Hearn's saying that the fight is very close, but what is the date going to be? Hearn can turn around and say, okay, we have agreed to the fight, but we're going to do it in December instead of June, and we're going to allow Tyson Fury to have a tune-up in June. That's very possible too. Let's not rule that out. Hearn could draw up a contract. Tyson Fury can sign it, and based off of whether Fury wins his fight in June, then the fight with Joshua is going to be signed and ready for December. So they could have an agreement in place. That could always be the case as well. Is that risky? Could Hearn turn around and say, well, I don't want to do something like that because, again, why are we going to make a commitment not knowing what's going to happen with Tyson Fury fighting in June? But Hearn's very savvy. He could use this as a promotional tool to hype up the fight. He can sit there and say, well, this fight is going to happen in December if Tyson Fury wins in June. But the risk you run here's the problem when you have these tune-ups. And we already saw it happen with Fury. He got that big cut against Wallen. So what if he gets headbutted or something happens in this tune-up fight where he gets injured somehow, and then it throws a monkey wrench in the fight for December. So there's always a risk with these tune-up fights. You know, these guys could slip on a banana peel or whatever, and then and could jeopardize the bigger fight down the road. So it's not always the best thing to have these tune-up fights sometimes when there's a big fight waiting in the wings, because anything can happen in a fight. You could break a hand. You could friggin' blow out a knee. You can suffer a bad cut. You know, you can be upset. So then you fight a lesser fight, and then you throw out the bigger money fight out the window. You can go into the fight sick and say, well, I'm going to still fight it anyways because I'm fighting a lower level guy, and then maybe you're sicker than you thought you were, and it's affecting you more than you thought it would, and then you're not able to put on the performance that you want to put on. So there's so many intangibles here. I'll be perfectly honest with you. If it was me, I was managing Fury, I would try to make this fight for June. That's what I would try to do. I would try to make this fight for June. I wouldn't fight any tune-ups. I would try to make this fight for June, and I would try to, if I'm training Fury, if I'm managing Fury, I would make sure that he got in the best shape possible and just bring in some good sparring partners. You know what you could do is just have some fights. Have like Sugar Ray Leonard when he was getting ready for Hagler. He had real fights. Like he fought like had like a real fight with Quincy Taylor, 12 rounds, no headgear on. Obviously, I don't think I would take the headgear off, but just have real tough sparring that would simulate a real fight against pretty solid guys, and just train that way. Like Sugar Ray Leonard was fighting, he's sparring with Quincy Taylor because he was off for so long. He had simulated real fight. He had a real fight with Quincy Taylor without headgear on and with smaller gloves, just to get himself used to taking the shots again. That's what he did. So, it is what it is. That's what I would do. And, I have to be perfectly honest with you. I'm extremely, extremely pessimistic that this fight's going to happen in June. This is my opinion. And again, I hope and pray that I'm wrong. I really hope that I'm wrong. I don't want to be right. I want people to come back and say, Beeb, I thought this fight wasn't going to happen. Huh? What are you talking about? I'll welcome the criticism. Oh, Beeb, why are you being so negative? I'll welcome any positive news to take away my negativity. Honestly, that's how I feel. I'm not the type of person where I want to be right all the time. Sometimes I want to be wrong. Sometimes I think the worst, and I want my thoughts to be wrong. I want someone to prove me wrong. So I hope that this fight happens. Eric Corey says, you're a Tyson Fury hater, just be honest. No, I just told you at the beginning of the video, Tyson Fury is my favorite fighter in boxing right now. I absolutely love Tyson Fury. I have a Tyson Fury t-shirt. So for you to say that I'm not a Tyson Fury fan, I'm a hater. And again, people want to throw that hater term around, and they want to throw the nut hugger and the fanboy term around every time you say something that they disagree with or they don't like. And all you do when you say that is you just show your weakness in your debating skills. When people throw those terms around, they basically don't have nothing to bring to the table. They actually ran out of ideas, or they never even had any ideas or any intelligent thought. to to come up with. That's right, Dr. Monfongo. I'm the biggest Fury fan ever. I picked him to beat Klitschko. I picked him to beat Wilder both times. I absolutely love Tyson Fury. And sometimes when you love somebody, that means you have to, be brutally honest, because you want to be brutally honest with people that you like, that you admire. Okay? By me saying these things, I'm rooting for Tyson Fury to do the right thing. But I cannot ignore, just if I had a family member who was an alcoholic and I had a liquor chest in my house and I didn't put a lock on it, I would be very, very skeptical of him going into that liquor chest and drinking the alcohol. Right? Does that mean that I'm a hater of that person? So if I question that person's willpower, and if I question that person's discipline in being able to resist that alcohol, I'm just telling the truth. That doesn't mean that I hate the person. I'm being disrespectful to the person. I'm just telling the truth. Tyson Fury, as much as I love him, as big of a fan as I am of Tyson Fury, I have to be honest with his behavior. I can't just blindly tell you that I think that this fight's going to happen in June, and I'm 100% confident it's going to happen in June. I can't do it. The guy's unstable. He's always been unstable. He's always had erratic behavior. Has a history of substance abuse. Admittedly, the guy's suicidal. Has had thoughts of killing himself. You think I'm happy about all this stuff? You think I want these? I'm comfortable and I want to say these things and I want to talk about these things, but I can't ignore that they exist, and I can't ignore that it has an impact on his boxing career, because obviously it does. So it is what it is. Sugar Ray Leonard is my favorite fighter of all time. I love him to death as well. Tyson Fury is my favorite current fighter. Sugar Ray Leonard is my favorite fighter of all time. But he's had his demons as well. I've interviewed Sugar Ray Leonard. He's talked about his demons. He's openly discussed his demons with me, and I was honored that he would do that. Okay? So it is what it is. It is what it is, man. All right, guys. All I can do right now is be optimistic, but I will tell you this: if we don't get an announcement by the end of this month, if we don't get an announcement by the end of this week, or let's just say this: if we don't get an announcement by the end of next week, never liked Oscar. Oscar De La Hoya is not my favorite fighter. No, I respect. I don't like Oscar De La Hoya. I hope you're being facetious there, Centurion son. I hope you're just kidding around by saying that. I hope you're being sarcastic, but no, De La Hoya is not my favorite fighter. I respect him, but he's not my favorite fighter. Not at all. Sugar Ray Leonard is my favorite fighter of all time. Tyson Fury is my favorite current fighter right now. And also my second favorite fighter of all time is Andre Ward. I love Andre Ward. Okay, you're just joking. Thank you. Oh, I was hoping you were joking. Yeah, my favorite fighter of all my favorite fighter of all time is Sugar Ray Leonard, and Pernell Whitaker and Andre Ward are tied for second. And Tyson Fury is my current favorite fighter right now. I like Tyson Fury, Pernell Whitaker, and Andre Ward. They're like tied for second place. I like all three of them equally as much. I like them all for different reasons. Andre Ward obviously is a highly skilled guy, but just his mental toughness, his strength, his versatility. Pernell Whitaker, I loved his style. He was a beauty to watch. He would just stand in front of a guy and not even move his feet and just use upper body movement from the waist up, and the guy couldn't even hit him. Um, and then there's Tyson Fury, a guy who's 6'9", who's so coordinated, so versatile. And when he's in that ring, he just has a mental toughness and a determination to him. So Sugar Ray Leonard's my favorite fighter, and then you can make an argument that not even make an argument. I'm going to say Andre Ward, Pernell Whitaker, and Tyson Fury are tied for second. I love all three of those guys. I love all three of those guys. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Beeb is out. Maybe I'll drop some more videos on this moving forward tomorrow. We'll see what happens. And I'd love to do a video to come out and say that I was wrong, and I'd love to do a video and talk about the announcement of this fight between Fury and Joshua. I'd love for that to happen. I'd love for that to happen. But until next time, Beeb is out. Talk to y'all soon. And I will catch you all later. Thank you so much. And always don't forget to check out the Ringside Reporter podcast every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, when myself and Eric Loda, we go live. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Talk to y'all soon. Peace out.